Have you ever wanted to know how to get through a boatload of stuff without getting distracted? Well, I've got 3 tips, maybe more, that I think will help you out immensely right after this. Yes, this is Jason Hodge, and you have tuned in to another one of my broadcasts. Okay, I took a little time off, but I'm back in the saddle, and I wanted to just kind of dive right on in head first with one of the areas that actually I have struggled with for years, and that is getting stuff done without getting distracted. Now, many of my colleagues have the same exact situation. And I thought that it's one of those things that I probably should talk about today, just to kind of give a light at the end of the tunnel for those of you who have not figured out a way to master this. Okay, so here we go. All right, so now the 3 things that I like to do in order to keep myself on target, to get stuff done without getting distracted. And there's so many distractions that I have, so many of them. And I found a key, a technique that gets me through my stuff. Here's the 3 things. Have a plan. And that's not as easy as it may sound. But have a plan, and I'll talk about how you go about creating your plan in this broadcast here. Next thing is to move through that plan until you've completed your setup and laying of the foundation. And then lastly is to test and tweak, then rinse and repeat. Okay, let's look at these things. Now, the having a plan, why is that so important? Well, so many of us tend to dive into things without really having a specified end goal objective. And so when we don't have an end goal objective, what ends up happening is that we end up doing a lot of things, spinning wheels, which I absolutely hate. It's one of my biggest pet peeves is to spin my wheels. I will avoid at all costs doing something if I think it's going to be one of those wheel spinners, and which can be one of those horrible distraction or procrastination pitfalls that I fall into. So I have to immediately put things into perspective so that I know that it is going to end up doing or going somewhere where I ultimately want to be. So the plan for me is crucial, and I would imagine that it would be crucial for you too. If you're not working off of a plan, then you probably will find, and I would bet good money on it, maybe not my money, but somebody's good money, that if you do implement a plan in your life, that you will be able to take care of that not getting stuff done or getting distracted. Now, here's the key, though. This is point number 2. Moving through that plan until you've completed your setup or the laying of the foundation. Let me tell you why that's important. Okay, and I'm going to tell you from first-hand experience. Okay, I'm total transparency here. Now, I don't want you to hold this against me, all right? If you hold this against me, I'll not talk to you again. So here we go. Now, with the distractions, right? With the going through or having to move myself through a particular process until I'm finished it. See, I have or had a very I don't want to say a bad habit, but let's just say it was a propensity towards starting in on something. And if I don't have that clear direction that I can see that finish line, I know exactly what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, have my big why in front of me with that roadmap, I would get into something and then midstream, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I should probably be doing this. Something that is distracting me from getting to the end of that project. Now, what I used to do is sit and think, well, I wonder why that happens. Why did I do that? Now I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to avoid that process, that mindset at all costs. You don't have time to think about the whys. All you have time to do is to get through the task at hand. How do you do that? Well, first thing is that you want to suspend all judgment to make sure that you don't change anything. You don't change not one dot or cross of the T on that blueprint of the things that you are supposed to do, that you have written out, that you've planned out. Don't change anything until you've actually set it up, until you've gone through it. The reason why is because if you start changing and tweaking things along the way, what ends up happening is that you don't end up getting to the destination that you had planned. You don't end up getting finished. What ends up happening is that you end up in a cycle or a process of ever tweaking, always perfecting, never finishing. So you've got to get to the end, and then you look back and you take what I like to call inventory. Take external inventory and say, okay, so let's see, can I do that more efficiently on the next go round? Are there any areas that I found to be a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of energy, or that was unnecessary altogether, which kind of equates to a waste of time, energy, and possibly money? You start looking at those things after you finish, because then you have a good idea of what it is that you need to do in order to better the process. You see, it's not going to be perfect out of the gate, so take that out of your mind. And if you do knock it out of the park where it is perfect out of the gate, okay, great. But you won't know that until you actually finish the process, now would you? So you still have to get to the finish of the process in order to determine if it was a perfect process or not. More than likely, it's not going to be. If it is, great. I want you to call me and tell me how you did it, and let's do lunch. But other than that, you want to get to the end, test, tweak, and then you rinse and repeat with the tweak in place of that plan, and you go through that process again, and you continue to hone it. You continue to look at your metrics to see what were the outcomes, what were the pluses, the minuses, and all of that. And then you see how much of the minuses you can get rid of and how much more pluses you can add. Now, let's talk about that quick thing that I said about not taking the time to navel gaze. Now, navel gaze, let me tell you what it does. It's just another ploy to not get your stuff done. You sit there and you start thinking, well, I wonder what was psychologically going on with me that day that I didn't finish up the plan that I made. Let me sit down and maybe pour a cup of coffee or tea, maybe hot chocolate in these colder winter months or fall months. And let me contemplate this. And let me spend hours on end contemplating the why. What's the deeper psychological meaning behind this? Well, maybe it was parental issues. Maybe it's daddy issues. Maybe it's mommy issues. Maybe it's neighbor issues. And you go through all the maybes of your life, and all the while, your project is gathering dust. You're not moving it forward. And then you have to contemplate that later. Well, I wonder why I took the time to contemplate my contemplations and why I didn't get the other things done while I was contemplating not getting the things done. I wonder why. You got all these whys going, and meanwhile, nothing is getting done. So, suspend all of your whys, suspend all of the navel gazing, suspend all of that. Don't think of that. You don't have time to. You only have time to carry out what it is that you've written down. How do you do that effectively? Only way to do it effectively is not to keep it in your mind. Put it down in checklists. Make a checklist, and as you're tweaking, you will be adding and subtracting things from that checklist. And your job is to make sure that every one of those items on the checklist have been checked off. And then, after they've been checked off, you evaluate, and then you say, didn't need this, or this, so you take them off your list. And then you say, but I did need this, and this could have made it more efficient. You put those on your list. You rinse and you repeat. You do it again, and you do it again and again and again until you've got it down to a science to where you know you've got the flow of everything. And now you're able to train somebody in order to get that checklist done. And you can move on to something else that you create another checklist, another template for. At that point, you've become successful at that particular project or that venture, and that's great. That's what you want. Now, if you were to choose to navel gaze, I would say, why? Because you don't need to navel gaze at that point. You don't need to sit there and think about why you would have or wouldn't have all of that, because now you got to move on to something else. You got to progress your successes forward. And you have to move other people into those areas so that they can be successful. I had an uncle who used to say this years ago. And he says, you train yourself out of your work. You train yourself out of your job. Your function when you take on a task is to become so proficient and efficient in that task. And then you take somebody under your wing and you train them, or you train a group of folks, because that's how you begin to scale your efforts. You begin to scale your abilities to expand and to increase not only your influence, but your cash flow, your streams of revenue. Because consider this, if you get something down to a science and you're able to now train a group of people, maybe you could automate the training. Maybe you videotape what you're doing, or if you're doing stuff on the computer, you screen capture it. And now, as you are going through the motions that you have tweaked and perfected, quote unquote, you have a recording of that. Now you could pass that on to a worker, an outsourcer, an employee, and a mentee. And you say, okay, so now I want you to follow these instructions or follow this example, and I want you to do this. Or you have a group of them. I want you all to follow this example, and I want you to do this. Now you move on to the next portion of your system. And you start working on that, tweaking that, getting the understanding of the process. And you create another, what I like to call cookbook. And before you know it, you've gone through all the stations of what it is to make a success out of what it is that you do, whether it be what you do for work, what you do in life, what you do with your family, any of those things. It's all the same thing. You go through that process of honing those skills, honing those tasks, honing those processes, and then what ends up happening is that you're able to train and move out of those arenas and go on to something that you ultimately want to do, which is probably spend more time with your family, traveling, whatever it is. You have now created your own system of freedom. And it all came through honest, ethical work of moving through a given task or process that you have written down, checklisted, templated, and you compelled yourself to move through the whole thing, suspending judgment until you have completed it. That's how you get stuff done. That's how you make it so that you can do the things without getting distracted or overwhelmed. You just follow the plan, stick to the checklist, make sure everything is checked off before you move on to something else. I'm sure hoping that information caught you in the right space, the right mindset, and that you're able to receive that information and to take it to heart. If you have any questions, if you want to connect with me, please don't hesitate. Pop on over to askjah.com. That's askjah.com/GSD. And that stands for Getting Stuff Done. Again, that's askjah.com/GSD. I'm Jason Hodge. I am looking forward to coming to you again with another broadcast. And, hopefully you have some great stuff to share with me. All right. I'm talking like testimonials, though, not just random stuff. All right. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.